Hello and welcome. It's our Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading us. Let's see what the discerning Radio 2 listener has been up to this week. We have a concise collection this week, including some tardy technical trouble, a broken boot blunder, a fiendish fringe fabrication, and a scandalous stain stumble. Who are you going to forgive? Here it all comes. It's not midnight yet, you know. Pay attention. 17 minutes to 6 is Radio 2, and then a drive time confession sent in by Patrick. Patrick, thank you very much indeed. Don't forget, we put them all in the Confessions podcast. That's available at the end of the week. And you can send yours to confessions@bbc.co.uk. And this one, let's just make sure I've got everything lined up and ready to go. Yes, indeed. Patrick says, Dear Father Simon and the Holy Order, today consisting of Sister Pauline in for the last time before she's thrown out.
Head back into retirement.
For bad behaviour. Yeah. And Sister Caroline is obviously here. So, yes, over lunch at school one day, Father Simon, a new teacher, an economics teacher to be precise, shared a problem with me. He wanted to propose to his girlfriend. Now, that wasn't the problem. The problem was that his best friend had flown his girlfriend to New York and proposed on the top of the Empire State Building, which was all anyone was talking about in their friendship group. You can imagine that set the bar unrealistically high for everybody else. Being an economics teacher, he was looking for an idea equal to or greater than that one, where the bottom line equaled on the cheap. He'd come to the right man, for I was a drama teacher, equipped with highly creative notions, a gift for origami, a keen eye for romantic detail, and a key to the pyrotechnics cupboard. A plan was quickly hatched. He does sound like precisely the guy you need to go to. He was to invite her out next Sunday afternoon for a stroll around the old castle. He was to stand beneath the arched tower at 3 o'clock precisely, and on seeing a large puff of smoke and on hearing a loud bang, he should bravely lead her over to investigate the mysterious occurrence, whereupon they would find a beautifully decorated box and a freshly cut rose, as if by magic. Not just any box, though. Oh, no. It just so happened that I had recently mastered the art of ever-decreasing origami boxes, fashioned from covertly researched photocopied sheets that related to all her favourite pictures, poems and novels. This was, I'm sure you'll agree, a thing of beauty that contained a reasonably expensive secret. All was going nicely to plan. I had laid out my low-voltage cabling, attached my theatrical maroon, and suppressed my excitement to manageable levels. I now lay in wait, out of sight of the entrance, which was but a few hundred feet away. It was now exactly 3 o'clock. I marvelled at my own efficiency, but not so much theirs. 5 minutes passed and there was no sign of them. I was beginning to ponder fundamental questions like, did I have the right day, the right date, the right castle, the right point? Well, when I spied a loving couple beneath the arch tower, I thought, aha, there they are. They paused, they kissed, and I fired. Hang on.
Bats. What's up? But yeah, pigeon effect.
Yeah.
Bats.
Boom went the maroon, as they say, echoing nicely around the ruins. Off went the crows from the tops of the trees. Whoosh went the smoke. Rather more than I'd imagined, I have to say. I withdrew the cabling, thereby leaving no trace and further heightening the magic. I disappeared into the moat and made good my escape. Perfect. Also, I thought. As I came up out of the moat, towards the car park, I noticed two things. My target couple were not only just arriving and getting out of their car, but they were also deep in a row of some kind. She didn't look very happy at all. The maroon may have fired, but they missed every single bit of it, its launch and its explosion. The other thing I noticed was a distressed-looking couple moving away from the castle. She had her hands over her ears and the most astonishing amount of bird poo over every single bit of her. It seems the crows were scared too, if you see what I mean. She looked like one of those statues which had been sat on by hundreds of birds over hundreds of years. Well, they got into the car and drove away. It took me quite a while to take in the scene and the concomitant ramifications, thank you, such that I was still standing there when my friend passed me by, both of us with the word sorry written clearly over our faces. I later learned that later in the day that the mother and father of all rows had been had about his commitment, apparently. But their day and argument only got sorted when they finally found the magic box and the word yes was uttered with considerable relief to all concerned. So I need to beg forgiveness, not from him because he should have stage managed the day with more finesse, or from her because she had made them late complaining about his commitment issues. But obviously the people I have to seek forgiveness from are the innocent couple who just popped out for a nice romantic smooch, thinking that they had the place to themselves, but ended up having their moment dramatically upset, and who to this day, no doubt, have no reasonable explanation for what occurred, why the old ruins went bang like that, and why the birds decided to take out their fear all over her shoulders, her face, and so on. Patrick falls at the feet of the people's verdict is obviously due any moment, but we need to find out what Sister Pauline thinks, and I suspect she's feeling stern and unforgiving like normal.
Well, I am, for the simple reason that, for reasons I find myself unable to explain, I have been bird-pooed myself. Twice in the past 6 months. It's not lucky.
It is.
Whoever made that up was utterly fantasising. Never in the whole of my life, and yet twice in the past 6 months. It is possibly the most gross and disgusting thing you can even begin to imagine.
Yeah.
And therefore I don't forgive him, because
Based on your own personal
based
misery.
on my own personal experience of, and what you described was like some sort of megastorm of bird.
Imagine
doings.
that. Clearly it's about 30 or 40 crows. They're
No,
big birds.
One between every 6 months was bad enough, and I'm still a bit traumatised. All at once? No. You should have thought. Ruins, birds, no.
Sister Caroline.
On the flip side, I was once out walking and saw a male model who was doing a photo shoot who was, one of the accidents happened on him, I'm putting it politely, and he had to take his top off, so that was quite a good moment, lucky for
Well,
me.
for you, not for him.
Every Patrick I've ever known has been naughty, but he was trying to do a good deed, and unfortunately it failed. So forgiven.
I was sure that I made a flapping diplodocus when I was younger, but Casper in Southampton does point out that the diplodocus didn't flap. It was a large walking dinosaur, which could have been why my diplodocus didn't flap very much.
Isn't it diplodocus?
No, of course it isn't.
Of course it is.
He thinks maybe I'm thinking of the pterodactyl.
It is, yeah. Or diplodocus. Yeah.
I think it's a
Cicada.
geographical thing, really. Depends which part of the country you're from. Because I'm sure down south we had diplodocuses. Confessions music is up and running, and into our collective we welcome back Sister Rebecca, who remembers how this works just about, the Dean of Deadliness.
Thank you so much.
Brother Man. Sophie has sent into tonight's confession. Don't forget, if you miss any, you can listen again, and you can download the Confessions podcast. Excellent. Father Simon and the Venerable Collective, my confession is from some years ago. Cast your minds back, if you will, to the swinging 60s. I was a 15-year-old, wrapped up in the Beatle era and everything that went with it. Well, not everything, Sophie adds. But the fashion then was for very tight, long black boots. And I longed for a pair of these, but money was tight in general, and my parents, although always generous, were unable to just splash out without thought. In those days, it was not as popular to have jobs until you left school and a paper round, although keeping me fit would have taken me forever to buy one of these pair of boots. Eventually, probably because of my constant moaning at my lack of fashion, my parents agreed that we could go and shop for some. Now, there are two important points you need to know. One, this was the middle of November and bitterly cold, and 4:30 in the afternoon and therefore dark. And two, I'm one of those people who, whether thin or fat, have large calves. And I don't mean the herd type, but in the lower leg. So, Sophie is a lady with large calves. This is relevant to the story. Why are you looking puzzled, Matt?
Sorry, that makes perfect sense.
You know what a large calf looks like?
I'm going to guess, so it's fine.
Good. We went to a very well-known high street shop in the town where we lived, and there we found two pairs of gleaming black boots that were, or would be, perfect.
Excellent.
I needed to try them on. At this point, I should also note that because of the weather, I had a pair of thickish black tights on. And I sat down on one of the seats, having selected my size, and proceeded to try them on. Now, when it came to doing the zip-up, I struggled because of my aforementioned large calves.
Yes.
No.
What's so funny?
Has he lost it? He's lost it. Has he lost it? Don't. Go on. Come on. You can do this. Come on, Simon. You can do this.
You've gone red. What's so funny? What's coming up?
He's seen it already.
It's funny. I need to... Yes.
Okay.
Still, determination set in, and the zip went all the way up, and I walked up and down in front of the mirror the way you do, proud and glowing with satisfaction.
Excellent.
My mother said the perfect words, well, if you like them and they fit, you can have them.
Oh.
And this is where my problem started. I tried to undo the zips. Well, the left leg was fine, but the right leg would not budge. Struggling away with a shop full of people and my mother getting more and more embarrassed, the zip finally started to move. However, my black tights had got trapped in the zip, and try as I might, and not wanting to look too conspicuous, I tried to release it, but to no avail. Then my mother tried, and probably because of her embarrassment, tugged rather too hard.
No.
The zip swished down and in the process cut a large groove out of my leg.
Oh, no.
The tights caught in the zip and ripped. They'd left a chunk still in the zip, leaving a big hole in the tights and a big hole in my leg, which was now bleeding.
Oh, no!
There was blood. I took the boot off, but what were we going to do? As I said previously, my parents were not flush with money, certainly not to throw away on damaged goods, and so after a short exchange, we decided to put them back on the shelf.
No!
As if nothing had happened, and then leave. Now, the only problem was I had a large and growing hole in the back of my tights, just below the knee at the back of my leg, and blood oozing everywhere.
Oh, no.
All I could see was my prominently black leg with a huge wide hole which seemed to shine like a beacon. And if you're in the right place, you could see a crimson splash in the middle. Well, what to do? My ever-resourceful mother quickly said it was all right. We would leave the store as quickly as possible, and I would go first, and she would walk really closely behind me in an attempt...
Oh, outstanding.
No one had noticed that. Just to try and cover up this gaping hole. Well, we marched out of the store together, walking her with her tight to the rear of me, as if we were glued together in step, completely in unison, just like madness did. All those years later. It took what seemed like forever to get out of the shop. Once outside, though, our problems got worse. We had to walk to the other end of the high street to catch a bus, exactly in the same manner. It was bitterly cold. The hole was getting bigger. My everlasting remembrance of this story is the two of us walking down the high street, my mother walking tightly behind me as she could to cover up this huge offending hole. Heaven knows what people were thinking when they saw us. Perhaps they thought we were some kind of comedy act practicing, or just a pair of idiots. It suffices to conclude my passion for long black boots left me there and then. For some weeks before my mother would go out with me, I never went back to that particular high street store. So, Father Simon and the Venerable Collective, I need forgiveness, please, from my mother for embarrassing her so much. From the high street store, who had a pair of long black boots which they couldn't sell because my tights and some of my skin had tangled themselves in there. And also forgiveness for not owning up to one of the assistants, who would have been obviously the honourable thing to do. And I didn't take the righteous path. I need your forgiveness, says Sophie. What do we say, Sister Rebecca? How do
I think she should probably have, known that she had large calves and that they were quite tight boots, as the fashion was at the time. She probably should have taken the thick black tights off when she tried them on. She could have put on a pop sock or something like that.
Ooh, so I don't think pop socks are ever very good, are they?
Well, that's what you're supposed to do when you try. Well, in a way. I mean, sometimes. Anyway,
what do you wear, Deadly, when you have thigh-high boots on?
Very little.
If you're doing little, because if you're doing,
just the boots, just the boots.
If you're doing strictly,
yes,
it is.
Please take to the floor. I do, with just the boots.
Now that image is stuck in my head.
Kinky boots. Oh,
Brucey. Anyway, I think it was Sophie's mother's fault, actually, because she was clearly the one who came up with the idea of just walking out of the shop without telling the shop assistant and walking behind her in that very suspicious fashion. I think the shop would probably have been fine if she'd just said, look, I'm sorry, my tights got stuck in the zip.
And there's a bit of skin there. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. They probably, it happens all the time, doesn't it? I'm sure it does. So I think Sophie's forgiven, but her mother isn't.
What do you make of this, Dean of Deadliness?
I can't forgive, really, because she knew, even though Mother had spurred her on, these bloodied boots had gone back on the shelf.
They had.
You can't do that.
No.
I thought it was a very good exit plan from the store. That was very good. I'm not so sure you needed to do all that in the street. Just get on the bus and go if you're going to go.
I do like the idea of mother and daughter walking in perfect unison like madness to the
that would
bus.
look so funny. But no, I find the bloodied boots offensive. Okay. What if I'd gone in the next to pick those up?
I think swinging 60s confessions would be good. Shoe shop confessions, getting your zip caught confessions, the way Sophie did.
Deadly and leather boots confessions,
yes,
that'll do for me.
What do you think?
Blood damage. I mean, let's be honest, the boots that they put back, they're display models, aren't they? So the shop's going to be fine with them.
You might still try
no problem. No, they're just going to be display models. It's going to be fine. No loss to the shop at all. And but if you're going to get out of the shop, probably best not to draw massive attention to yourself by having your mother walk in step right behind you and then all the way to the boss for no reason. So I am going to forgive because no harm done.
And here's tonight's drive time confession. Gather round, kids. Anyway, this one comes from Kevin, and it's interesting. Now, you might feel a little bit excluded from this, Rebecca. But,
why?
Well, you'll see. Dear Father...
That's football.
No, not at all. Dear Father Simon and the Honourable Collective, having laughed along to all your Edinburgh confessions 2 weeks ago, I found myself remembering with a jolt that I too have a confession relating to the Edinburgh Festival. So this was when you were away. We all went to the Edinburgh Festival.
I was on holiday. Do you want to just say that again?
Another holiday. Yeah, amazing. But there's a weekly Mayo, which is a podcast which you can get, and all the confessions are on there as well. Just thought I'd mention that. Anyway, back to the confession. My confession takes us back, Simon, to the summer of 2005. I was fresh out of university, in proud possession of an English literature and creative writing degree, but now faced with the problem of doing something with it. A timely email from a helpful tutor pointed me in the direction of a certain newspaper, which was looking for graduate interns to work as reviewers at the festival throughout the month of August. I duly applied, navigated an interview in which I was asked what vegetable I would like to be. I was soon on the train north. Is that the most rubbish question? You do? Why do people from personnel ask? Assuming it's
nonsense.
personnel.
Nonsense.
What kind of vegetable would you like?
A marrow.
And what
Next.
does that tell? Ridiculous. Interview confessions, very good. So I was on the train north. The workload of the graduate reviewer was fairly hefty. It meant tearing around the busy city, seeing a spectrum of shows at all hours, some good, some bad, and one late-night postmodern opera involving a lot of inexplicable yelling and writhing, which was, I have to tell you, the worst and most baffling thing I've had to sit through before or since. Check out that. I bet you...
I love that kind of stuff.
That.
Yes, please.
You'd have enjoyed that, Rebecca.
What, the writhing, yes.
The writhing and the postmodern opera. What's more, all reviews had to be in by noon the next day, with no exceptions, which often meant writing late into the night in order to get it sent in on time to head out to the first show of the day the next morning. Let it also be noted that we weren't getting paid, nor getting anything towards the cost of staying in Edinburgh during the peak season. Still, I loved it. Exploring the city was fantastic, and I was getting to put my writing skills to use. The crux of my cultural confession centres on one play that I was scheduled to review, set somewhere along George Street. I set out as usual, map, programme and notebook in eager hand, but the venue was nowhere to be seen. I walked the length of George Street, then started ducking down nearby back streets, asking important and weird-looking people and peeping into their venues to see whether they might have a second venue in a smaller room round the back. The minutes before curtain up were slipping by, and still I couldn't find my destination. A clock somewhere struck the hour, and I spent a few more desperate minutes asking and looking. These were the days before most people had the internet on their phones, but I won't blame technology for what I did next. With the doors, wherever they were, now surely closed, and with no chance of writing a review in the conventional way, I went home and made one up.
Oh, I say. Oh dear.
With the aid of the programme to help with the details, I wove a balanced, non-committal review about a show I had not seen, fired it off to my editor on time and received the usual email of thanks in reply. I recently found my old Edinburgh cuttings and reread my made-up review with amusement. Apparently the play was, and I quote, a nostalgic account of one man's pain being soothed by nature, where bitterness and melancholy slide past one another. I'm not quite sure this is your kind of thing. It also had, I quote, a good set and made imaginative use of echoes. In fact, what more could you ask? In fact, apart from the animal costumes that were apparently childlike and distracting, I'm sorry I missed the play as it sounds rather good. In my defence, the review ended up just a meagre 100 words printed in the corner of a page, so I doubt that many people read it. I gave it a non-committal 3 stars out of 5, which I'm sure the company would have been pleased with, along with my description of their work as a treat for the senses, with gentle magic which will leave you lost in your thoughts. Anyway, after my stint at the festival, where I was shortlisted for an award for promising writers, I went on to become a journalist for real, landing a job at a local paper and being paid to write theatre reviews for the entertainment section, a dream job. So, Father Simon and the humble few, I ask forgiveness not from my editor for printing an entirely fabricated review, because I'm sure they were simply glad to receive an article and fill up some space. While chasing the other students who hadn't submitted their work within the deadline. But from the theatre company who no doubt showed the completely made-up review with pride to their family and friends when I never actually saw the show in the first place. Well, you always suspect this kind of thing might go on. However, here's proof that actually it does in this case. Kevin never saw the show, but he still wrote about it. What do you think, Sister Rebecca, the journalist?
I'm absolutely convinced that it wouldn't be the first time that somebody had made up a review. I mean, not that I know this from first hand, but I'm sure that people have done it. It is risky, because what if the show had been cancelled? I mean, it'd be so embarrassing to be caught out like that. But clearly it wasn't cancelled, and clearly the people behind it were quite pleased because there was no complaint. So I don't think any harm was done to anyone, so I'm going to forgive you.
Do you think reviewers and critics have a lot to confess? I think they almost certainly do. That was a rhetorical question. Come on, critics, you know you want to tell us something. Simon Mayo at bbc.co.uk. Brother Matt, what do you think?
Well, you need to be very careful here, because I can think of one very high-profile critic who got found out for reviewing a movie that he'd not seen. And those kind of things can come back to haunt you.
They do.
They do.
Yes.
But I'd say this, to be honest, the production aren't going to be interested in chasing up a 3-star review. No one gives a monkeys about 3-star reviews. They're only interested in 1-star reviews and 5-star reviews. Those are the only ones anyone reads anyway. So putting it at 3 stars meant that no one was going to read your review. So you were fine. So I'm going to say forgiven.
This is BBC Radio 2 at Drive Time with another family confession. It is a family confession, actually. That's what it is. Novice Nigel has joined us, having cleaned up the student party at 3 o'clock in the morning and then put a photograph of it up online, although you claim it's the ingredients for the food, but it did look as though you'd scraped it off the floor, Nigel.
Well, I thought it looked all right, but obviously I actually had to make sure the dog didn't get it. In the middle of the night, I woke up and thought, no, it's OK, my peanut brittle is safe.
Are we going to be eating something the dog has had?
No, it didn't. Avoided it.
Just a bit.
Which probably tells you quite a lot about it.
Oh, dear.
OK, well, we're looking forward to tamarind custard with peanut butter or something.
It's salty peanut brittle.
Love it.
That's coming up after 6 o'clock, but the music is running, and here we go. So we've got a foodie theme, actually, for tonight. We try and find a food one. If you have any food-based confessions, Thursday is where they'll often turn up, because Novice Nige turns up with us. Father Simon, the Esteemed Collective, this is from Stephanie. Thank you very much indeed, Steph. I wish to seek your forgiveness for an unfortunate misdemeanour that took place in the 1990s, whilst I was a student working abroad, and it's haunted me ever since. Back in 1996, I was studying for a degree in French and Spanish. As part of my university course, I had to spend a year working in France and studying in Spain. The Spain bit was brilliant, but my experiences of being a... is it stagiari?
Stagiari? No, I don't know. Stagiari?
Stagiari, that'd be
That's Italian, isn't it? Stagiari.
This is what foreign students are called if they're working in France.
Yeah. Stagiaire? Stagiaire?
Stagiaire.
I've never heard of that.
No,
that's a typo.
No, stagiaire is yeah. That's
enough
right.
already.
There you go.
Stagiaire.
It's not relevant.
Nice.
It was just included. Anyway, left a lot to be desired. Having lived in a tent for 2 months near Toulouse, which my French colleagues laughingly referred to as a gîte, I was then dispatched to a 4-star hotel on the west coast of France. Being the only English student there amongst a plethora of French hotellerie professionals was somewhat challenging, to say the least, especially as my silver service experience was non-existent. It was decided that I should begin my work placement by spending a few weeks serving in the hotel restaurant in order to improve my French. During this time, I had to learn to fold napkins into a variety of intricate shapes, was taught how to carry a multitude of full and empty plates without dropping them, and had to learn the names and origins of about 20 different French cheeses. All this alongside being shouted at daily by various angry French chefs and trying to remember enough of the language not to humiliate myself in front of the guests. Sounds like a tough gig, really. I got off to a slow start, but eventually I could carry 3 full plates reasonably well, and my cheese knowledge was gradually improving until the day in question. The hotel had a variety of guests, from business people on conferences to well-heeled tourists. They came from all over France to partake of these spa facilities and gulp down the revolting oysters and fine meats served in a very rich sauce that the hotel was renowned for. One evening, a large party of around 10 guests arrived for dinner. Jean-Luc, the head waiter, who had a rather disconcerting habit of rolling his eyes at me in a despairing way and then uttering in a stage whisper,
Oh, here we go. Brilliant. It's accent time, everyone.
Go on.
I'm going to do my best, OK? Bof, elle est nulle. She is useless. How did I do?
That's not bad, actually, yeah.
Bof, elle est nulle. She is useless. Decided that I would be their dedicated waitress for the evening. I was determined to show Jean-Luc that I wasn't totally null, so I threw myself into the task. It started well. I served their wine, made sure they had enough bread and served their starters, all without mishap. They realised I wasn't French and started to chat to me. I fear this is what took my mind off the job momentarily and led to my mishap, as I was so happy to have someone being friendly towards me after weeks of being shouted at by the aforementioned Jean-Luc and all the other chefs. Next came the meat course, and yes, it was served in one of those hideous rich sauces the hotel was renowned for. I gingerly took my 3 loaded plates and headed for the table. I remembered to serve the ladies first and was just passing the first plate to one of them when out of the corner of my eye I saw something fall. Ever so gently, ever so slowly, a little trickle at first, then gradually stronger, like rainwater down a window. I looked more closely and realised that despite Jean-Luc's training, I wasn't holding the second plate level, and the sauce was trickling off the plate in a fine, rich cascade onto the shoulder of one of the male guests. Horrified, I abruptly pulled the plate level and braced myself for the apology and inevitable recrimination and humiliation that would follow. Then I noticed that the man was wearing a resplendent brown, vividly patterned Noel Edmonds-esque jumper. The rich brown sauce matched the colour of the jumper perfectly and had become totally invisible as it soaked into the pattern. I debated whether to own up and face another public telling off by Jean-Luc or whether to keep quiet. I chose the latter and carried on serving the rest of the meal, despite the fact that I'd emptied nearly an entire plate of sauce onto the man's shoulder. The guests continued to chatter away, quite unaware that one of their party was sporting a gravy-covered shoulder. My conscience would have been clear had they not, at the end of the meal, exclaimed that the evening had been vraiment formidable, and thanks to La Petite Anglaise, and pressed a 20-franc note into my hand as a tip. For younger listeners, that was the old currency.
Can you remember how much that was worth?
20 francs?
Yes.
2 quid.
2 quid, not very much then, really, is it?
Well, yeah, but this is
In
the
those
90s,
days.
you know. So
This was
back then.
1934, anyway,
Yes.
so... Overcome with guilt, I tried to refuse it, but they were insistent as they said how impressed they were that a humble language student could be transformed into a first-rate silver service waitress. Oh, the guilt. So I need forgiveness, not only for misleading 10 French guests into thinking I was a competent silver service waitress, when I clearly wasn't, not just for accepting a tip when I wasn't supposed to, but for letting a guest leave the hotel restaurant with a drenched shoulder. When he got home to his chateau, his chemise would have been a strange colour of brown, like he'd been shot in the shoulder with an arrow. Anyway, he's probably to this day utterly perplexed as to how his favourite Noel Edmonds jumper came to be ruined. I don't think Noel is particularly big in France. Anyway, the 20 francs he gave me would have been fine for the dry cleaning bill. Anyway, I've never forgotten my knowledge of French cheeses, so I hope that might help when we get to Novice Nige, who's been making notes furiously all the way through that. He probably has many other tales to tell. This is Rebecca goes first.
I've just come back from France, and I have to say we commented a lot on how much sauce the French have on their food, and creamy sauce, and it's just too rich.
Beaucoup de sauce.
Beaucoup de sauce. I think there's too much sauce. I think it was Jean-Luc's fault for putting all that sauce on the plate, really. But obviously, no, not completely. I do jest, but I do think that if I'd been waitressing, I may have done the same. I did spend a lot of time waitressing when I was younger, and similar things may have happened.
Did they?
And, similar, not as bad as this. Things that people probably wouldn't have noticed ever. I'm not sure the customer would have noticed anyway. I mean, he probably just put his jumper in the wash and that was it.
What are you doing going to a smart restaurant in a Noel Edmonds jumper?
Well, exactly. So I think for all those reasons, I'm going to forgive you, Stephanie.
All right, thank you. What did we think? Let's do Novice Nige, because he might have some culinary facts.
Yeah, well, I thought when Steph said, for me, she won me over when she said I was guilty of misleading 10 French guests. That's all right, isn't it? Fine. And also, I did a similar thing, much younger than her, golden pheasant and Llangollen Christmas meal. I put down a bowl of very warm game soup, and as the other one went straight down the woman's ample cleavage, she did notice.
I bet she did.
Well, yeah, she would.
And she moved very fast, I have to say. And so did I. And then
And now you're married.
Yeah. No, what I did, I picked up and I thought, well, what should I do? Anyway, I picked up a serviette and damped her down, which actually didn't help at all.
That's a faulty towel.
Yeah, so I was then banished to the old plongeur in the kitchen, so that was it. I had to wash up.
I think the plongeur was the problem in the first place.
I plunged her in the wrong place twice. Anyway, there you go. So, Steph, yeah, absolutely forgiven, misleading 10 French guests, unlucky, but, I hope you enjoyed your 20 francs.
Spirit of Benny Hill has descended on us just a moment. What do you say there,
Well,
Brother Matt?
here's the one thing I love about this story is the boff bit, because boff is this sort of non-committal Gallic phrase that you accompany it with a bit of a shrug when you don't understand what the French are saying, which is practically most of the time in my experience over there. So I'm going to forgive just for the boff bit, because I love how it was her and Jean-Luc with their exchange of the boff.
And when he said buff, L.A. Null, she's useless, that's a horrendous way to treat anybody.
It is, yes, and what an amazing way to learn a language by being in a restaurant with the French. So I am going to forgive for that.
And they were them. Not bad, I think. Who did you forgive? Let us know. Send us your tale, please, because we all know you've got loads. And enough time has elapsed now, so no one's bothered. Confessions@bbc.co.uk, but only if they're legal. Thank you very much indeed.